NGE, Nobody Dies Chapter 14, Evangelion da Flamethrower, an Evangelion fanfic. So, about 10 years ago, right? Misato asks. Shinji gets sent to live with his aunt and uncle, who gets adopted, and Asuka starts cutting herself. It's not cutting, at least not from a clinical perspective. Cutting is, psychologically, normally associated with the individual being loud, obvious, and melodramatic. Asuka is none of those things. This was her trying to emulate what she perceived as an ideal state. Being used in a contact experiment. The other scars are from further incidents down the line where she emulated what she believed to be an ideal relationship between herself and her mother. You mean an ideal state where her mother beat her with a belt? Misato asks. Walking down the hallway next to her, Ritsuko nods, tapping her PDA's display screen to bring up reports. Sounds about right, she says. Is there a single person in the building without parent issues? Shinji, Ritsuko responds, I would say he's about the only one. Even if he couldn't live with him, both his parents made a point to involve them in his life so he knew he was not abandoned. Hence, Shinji ended up with probably the healthiest sense of self of all the pilots. Misato snorts, grumbling something involving a German scientist and a blowtorch. Yeah, makes sense, she says. He doesn't get angry, does he? He's like his mother, Ritsuko responds. He works his way out of situations. Anger is a tool he doesn't find the need for. I think if he ever does get angry, that's the point we run for the hills. The lift doors open beside them, the two stopping and staring as the newest pilot training, Mari Makinami, walks out. Dressed in a crisp, pressed nerve skirt uniform, what they find themselves staring at is the colorful tailed cap on her head. What is that? Misato asks. This? Mari asks, taking off the cap. Oh, this was from Dr. Ibuki. It's the prototype the PR department made. It looks like the angel we just killed, Misato says. Why are we making angel caps? PR department, Ritsuko says. Nerve has all the intellectual property rights to the sale of merchandise based on the angels and the Evangelions. You didn't know about this? I didn't, Misato says. PR department? We do merchandise? Maya runs the department, Ritsuko says, tapping her PDA before taking Misato's and tapping on her GPS program. Here we go. This should lead you there. They should be finishing your action figure prototype soon. With all the incentive she needs, Misato breaks into the run down the hallway, swearing under her breath as she turns and disappears around the corner. Pushing her glasses up her nose, Ritsuko grins. This should be good, she says, and walks after her. Chapter 14, Evangelion da Flamethrower. It is Sunday, so there is no school and Asuka volunteered to do hours at Nerve to give herself some free time during the week. Shinji was already gone when she woke up on the couch, having left her breakfast in the microwave and a note to call him if there was anything wrong. It seems Dr. Icaruswell, for lack of a better term, nurturing had rubbed off on Shinji, and she hopes to see him when she gets out of Nerve this afternoon. Smiling to herself, folder held in both hands, she passes silent co-workers and waits for the lift to arrive. The door opens and she stares into A's much like her own. Kyoko stares at her, lips a thin line, hands thrust in her lab coat pockets and glasses reflecting the light to keep her from seeing the red in her eyes. Asuka, she says. Hello, mother, Asuka responds, avoiding the gaze. Never embarrass me like that again, Kyoko says. Are we clear? Yes, mother. With that, Kyoko walks out of the elevator and past her, turning and disappearing behind the corner. Sucking in hard, sharp breaths, Asuka walks into the elevator and pushes the button for Dr. Ikari's floor. The large, double sliding doors have the words Nerve PR Department, Prototype Testing Facility emblazoned above them, standing at the end of a hallway Misato has never seen before. Steeling herself for whatever horrors await, She slides her key card through the slot next to the door and walks in. And screams. The orders were simple. He was to be given 24 hours of time to himself in Tokyo 3, with a nominal security detail trailing him but not interfering. Then, the chairman excused himself to direct a bake sale at a local school building. The private plane lands in the airport 15 miles north of the city limits. Twin engines power down, and a small army of black-suited men, each identical with pale hair and opaque sunglasses, file out, followed by a young man with ash hair and golden-red eyes, dressed in a white shirt and black slacks. He looks around, rolls his head back and takes a deep breath of the processed airport atmosphere, walking a step before his detail towards the customs agent and the gate. "Welcome to Tokyo 3, the woman says, hands folded behind her and smiling. "Mister. You don't need to know my name," he says. "In fact, you never saw me, or my agents here. And you'll let us pass." She presses a button and the gate opens. Kawari Nagisa and his entourage walk through and he enters the city of Tokyo 3 proper, a smile on his face. He made the decision to take this trip a week ago, after perusing reports of the happenings going on in the fortress city. Things caught his eye, and not just through the simple actions of the pilots, but also the images he was given of them. One of them caught his interest, and even if his destiny will be terrible, his form is still that of a teenage boy. As he is led to his car, sitting in the back seat as his guards take the front seat and the black SUV comes to life, he reaches into his pocket and takes out the picture, unfolding it to the image of the one he has come here to meet and maybe more. "I look forward to knowing you," he says, "Miss Ayanami." Misato Katsuragi stares into the room, standing in the open doorway. The factory line stops, halted in its tracks upon the scream of the Tactical Operations Commander's entrance. Ritsuko Akagi walks up next to her, opens her mouth, and stops, having gone completely silent. Maya Ibuki stares back. Maya Ibuki, dressed in a blue and black plug suit with blue bunny ears on her head, stares back. "I can explain," she says. "No, I don't think any explanation will cover this entirely," Ritsuko says. "Maya, have you been chosen by the Marduk report?" "Then I'm really not sure if it fits," Ritsuko responds, tilting her head, appraising her assisting in the skin-tight latex bodysuit as Ibuki blushes. "So's Misato would say if she could speak, what the F underscore?" Misato's mouth hangs open until Akagi pushes it shut, taking her privilege as a friend and slapping her across the face. Eyes blinking, senses returning, Misato walks in and looks Maya up and down. "What fresh hell have I just walked into?" she asks. Maya blinks, turns to the waiting engineers and workers and nods to the man in the orange overalls at the central controls. "Back to work," she calls. The assembly lines continue moving, faithful employees going about their work of assembling items as Maya leads them into the 3-story tall room. Ritsuko raises an eyebrow as she walks behind Maya before clenching her eyes and rubbing her nose, walking up next to Misato. "What is this?" Misato asks. "Nerve has property rights to anything to do with the angels or the others," Maya explains, her walk elongated before she stops and wiggles her seat, picking at it. "So Nerve's merchandising department manufactures action figures, novelties, and other kitsch items to supplement Nerve's operations budget." They stop at a metal crate at the end of the center assembly line. Misato begins rummaging through it, reaching in and taking out a 6-inch tall toy figure. The figure is pale, in a white and black plug suit molded onto the form, with light blue hair and red eyes. She reaches in and takes out another, which is in a red plug suit and otherwise identical to the first. "Why do they all look like Ray?" she asks. "Ray's Nerve's mascot," Maya responds, wincing as the two women turn on her. "Wait, what?" they both ask, staring at each other and then back at Maya. "She's Nerve's public face," Maya explains, lightly chuckling and shifting her seat. Well, it was sort of a work with it thing because as much as Section 2 would not want her status as a pilot to be public. This is Ray we're talking about, Ritsuko sighs. Why just Ray, though? It's well known at his school that Shinji is a pilot, too. Misato takes out a black plug-suited Ray, then a blue version. Tossing them back in, she walks over to the crate on the next line to the right, and yanks out Sachio. A plushy Sachio. What the F underscore? She screams. We probably will put out action figures of him, too, Maya responds. Come to think of it, he wouldn't be too uncomfortable with the prospect. We'd have to clear any of Uri with Dr. Sohu and any of Mana with the JSSDF, but we could always go for alternates and female variants by having Asuka versions. It would boost us up in the collector's market. Misato climbs over the conveyor belt and bolts to the next crate, screaming obscenities before holding up the Rami Il Buckyball cube. How long has Ro been the mascot? Ritsuko asks, because I feel uncomfortable if we were making action figures of a 5-year-old girl. Ray's just been doing this for the past 2 years, Maya explains, and that's how long we've been really doing manufacturing, too. Since the angels arrived, keeping the others' secrets been moot. And besides which, we only use Ro because she holds a resemblance to the previous mascot. Who was? Dr. Ikari. Ritsuko sighs, palming her face as Misato walks over with a Gagil sleeper pillow almost as big as she is. Please tell me you're doing this with the commander's authority, Misato says. You're a nice girl, Maya. I'd really hate it if you were taken out and shot. This was Dr. Ikari's idea, Maya responds, hands up defensively. She approves of all of this. Since she was the original contact pilot for Unit 01 before they cancelled their human testing, she also decided to make Nerve more public. During the earlier years, when constructions of the Evangelions were at an earlier phase, she would hold press conferences in a plug-suit prototype and basically sold the idea of Nerve. When I came aboard, one of the duties I took over as the others were finished was this department. Still doesn't explain the plug bunny suit, Misato deadpans, shifting the weight of the Gagil pillow and finding it squeaking. Product testing. Maya shifts again, grunting and pulling at something behind her with a wince. The plug suit material is lightweight, very durable, fireproof and waterproof, she explains. When stripped of the electronics it's actually a very useful material. We've been developing it for firefighters, rescue workers, race car drivers and fetish models. She wiggles again, muttering something under her breath. Problem is, it's tight, she says, and really hugs. It's like I'm wearing nothing at all. Ritsuko looks at the ceiling as Misato folds her arms and raises an eyebrow. Back up, she says, fetish? Maya mumbles something about catering to an all-age demographic before Misato walks past her and walks to the craft at the furthest conveyor belt. Maya runs after her, walking with elongated strides as Ritsuko tries to avoid staring directly as her assistant's spandex-clad ass. Katsuragi reaches into the crate, rummages, and takes out a 6-inch-long replica of Unit 01's entry plug. She twists the control at one end, and the plug begins to vibrate. Switching it off, she stares at Maya as the young woman goes beet red. You are so repressed. Knuckles rap on the door and Ryoji Kaji looks up from a psychological report to see Earl Sahu standing at attention. Kaji purses his lips, waits, then sighs. Stand down. Yuri's shoulders sag slightly and he waits. Can I help you, pilot? Yuri nods, clicking his heels together. Inspector Kaji, he says, I was made aware that you are considered an expert in dealing with matters related to women. Kaji takes the small glass by his computer, clinking together the ice cubes and takes a sip, grinning. I take it you haven't talked with Katsuragi lately, have you? He asks. Sir? Never mind, Kaji sighs. So, women troubles? Have to say, pilot, I heard you were of the don't really care column when it came to the ladies. What can Agent Kaji help you with in that area? The actual situation, as it turns out, was a series of misunderstandings and honest mistakes which spiraled out of control until something caught fire. While an intellectual, empathic, and high-minded individual, Kawari Nagisa is also a 16-year-old boy who was directly cloned from Lawrence Kyo. And something else was added in, but he shared many of his father's proclivities. So, when shown the profiles of the 3 current Evangelion pilots, he jet alone was not of Adam, after all, and therefore of no importance. He took a look at the profile of the 3rd child and decided a meeting would be interesting. He recognized the 2nd child from earlier in his life. And the 1st child got special attention from him. It was his mistake for not paying attention to the psychological attention part of the file in favor of surveillance folder. Instead of paying attention to the parts highlighted that read sociopathic tendencies, his mind veered more towards those legs go all the way up. In the game of destiny that his brethren must engage in, the end goal is to become the ultimate form of life. There are many ways to do this, and most of them involve contacting and consuming the alpha. The other way, the other possible way to make their representations viable, is to become a viable species. In other words, have offspring, delay the inevitable. As the only female Nephilim he knows of, she would be perfect. So, he mentally dominated Kyo, chartered a flight to Tokyo 3, and had picked up to be taken to the city's local 5-star hotel so he can woo her over the next 24 hours until his natural charms convince her of the necessity of breeding. That is a perfectly sensible idea, one which he is sure the chairman will approve of once he returns to Germany and his estate. In fact, the black SUV in front of him has the object of his current plan. He feels positively giddy in anticipation of what is to happen. A giddiness which he retains, albeit to a lesser degree when the head of one of the bodyguards is jammed through the roof, the car swerving left and right as a pale fist shatters the moon roof and she climbs out. Somehow, despite him being in the back seat and the windows tilted, she stands on the roof and waves at him, smiling. With a single, fluid motion, she handstands on the edge of the roof before flipping off, hanging in the air, and mule-kicking the SUV hard enough to make it flip and hit the highway divider before leaping off the overpass and taking off into the run on the street below. This plan may need some work. Quick footsteps behind her and Asuka turns, a forced smile on her face as she sees her brother come to a stop. He grins, hands folded behind him, and clears his throat. She smiles in response, hands folded in front of her as he shifts, hands shuffling something behind him. Frau Ikari agreed to give us both the afternoon off, he says, would you like? He glances to his side, inching out the yellow flash card in his hand so he can see the text. To get some Ben and Jerry's ice cream? Another inch to the next phrase. Might read? Her smile grows wider, and she nods. That sounds great, she says. I'm just going to change, is that alright? He nods, and watches her walk away, turning the corner and disappearing. Taking out the packet of yellow flash cards, he flips through them, nodding that he has kept them in numerical order. In his right pocket are the red set of flash cards, the one Inspector Kaji gave him for later, but since he is a trusted expert on the matter of cheering women up, they will be useful. He seemed curious. But of course, this was all to cheer up his sister. Why else would he ask for advice on women? And he would know that, too. Of course he would. Walking down the hall, he whistles a German ditty, unaware of Mari watching him from the doorway of one of the bathrooms. Is there something weird going on here? The phone clicks on and plays a military march, and Kensu Kaida glances at the number before resigning to fate and opening it. Hello? What you doing? Making sure I don't have a criminal record, he deadpans, sitting at his desk as he types on his laptop. What do you need, Ray? I need the quickest path to the harbor container yards. K? He pauses, brings up a GPS program, and sighs. Should I ask why? Outpacing cars, running alongside a speeding motorbike and waving at the rider who stares at her, Re pumps her legs a little faster and runs down the street, looking at the texted directions on her cell phone before turning, skidding and kicking off down a side street and towards the dead-end alleyway. Darting up, over and onto the roof of the apartment, she flips onto the roof and takes off into a run towards the towering cranes and ships of the Tokyo 3 harbor. The cars pursue, and Asuka watches them speed off. For some reason, she thought she saw something familiar, but Yuri shrugs, checks the note cards, and takes Asuka's hand to lead her along. That was odd, she says. Well, it is an odd city, he says, enjoyable, but odd. Has Katsuragi taken you clothes shopping, Asuka? He has little outside of his uniforms and plug suits except for a few formal outfits to wear, so he is still in the beige windbreaker and slacks, but she changed to a blue pullover and long skirt and knee-highs which he doesn't recognize. Yes, she did, she says with a smile, the day after I arrived, really. It looks nice on you, he responds with a smile. The ice cream stand is a quarter-mile from the G-front entrance, having come highly recommended from the inspector for its ambience, which he has little knowledge of the meaning of, and something about being secluded from prying eyes. He is not sure why such things are necessary to cheer up his sister, but the inspector knows what he is doing. Asuka sits down at one of the tables outside the stand that has a colorful umbrella situated over it, and Uri walks over to the counter, perusing the note cards and quickly memorizing the next sequence of phrases. 2 cups of ice cream in hand, he walks back and sits across from her, Asuka giving him her warmest smile. This is nice, she says. It is nice because I have your company, he responds. By the way, have you been working out? It looks like you have lost weight. 3 SUVs park and a dozen black-suited men climb out, quickly moving as one into the overshadowing metal container yards outside the Tokyo 3 docks. Trailing behind them, his smile more subdued than it usually should be, Kawara stares into the darkness and for a moment, swears it stares back. She is here somewhere, he says, don't hurt her. The bodyguards stare at him. They know better than to point out that she mule-kicked a car and can run up sheer walls, and simply nod and begin spreading out. 6 teams of 2 file in, each taking a different entrance between the great and massive containers and walking, guns out and ready, twitching at the slightest sound. Each are identical, and from what is known in the higher echelons of nerve, they are most likely clones, vat-bred for this purpose. Meaning she doesn't feel guilty about this at all. Under the shadow of a triple-stacked set of metal containers, 2 guards pass by one as the side door pops. They turn, guns and laser sights aimed, peering into the darkness. A cat comes out, mewing before running away, and the 2 guards relax. Until a pair of pale hands reach down and pulls them both up with a yelp. 2 teams run to the spot, stopping and waiting, circling around as they watch and observe. Only one of them actually screams when their 2 missing comrades drop down, hanging from their feet from an overhead beam, unconscious and with their sunglasses jammed up their noses. Where's their guns? One asks. Silence falls. The solemn, sudden realization that Rayanami is now armed hits them. There are sounds in the distance. More screams and thuds, and something that resembles a growl. Running, they move as one, the 4 identical guards skidding to a stop several rows down to find the sound gone and another 4 of their comrades hanging from the rafters. Who the hell are we tracking? One asks. Batman? I hope, another answers, that means she won't kill us. Another shift, another sound. They turn and aim to find the last 2 unaccounted for guards running towards them, skidding to a stop and breathing heavily. Hair matted and faces slick, their red eyes are wide in sheer, hopeless terror. Run! They scream, F_ING run. The 4 aim their weapons in the darkness, standing still, waiting for movement or confirmation or just sweet, sweet death. Something moves and they open fire, automatic gunshots echoing in the night. The bullets ricochet, going wild as they scream, the two runners running for the exits. Something moves in the shadows. An enraged, scared grey cat runs by them. Sighing, they lower their empty guns. Hee. They turn. Looking up, they find the face of a smiling Ayanami, who happily waves at them. Looking down, they come face to face with 900 pounds of polar bear. We're right next to the zoo. Ain't that great? It is good to see his sister smile, and even better to see his sister laugh. He has no idea why the cards suggest getting to third base or do you like Twister, so he ignores those because they make little sense. He also does not know what TTS means, which confuses him. So, he asks, what do you do on your time off? She shrugs, face pensive. Well, I work on projects for Dr. Ikari, she says. When I can, I end up with my other friends. Ah, the people who dragged me off to set Mother's car on fire, he responds. He grins, chuckling. They are good friends, then, he says. You have lovely eyes. She pauses, tilting her head. Her brow furrows and he takes the moment to glance at the cards. This makes no sense, he says to himself. Why would I see unborn children in them? Turns back to her, smiling and shuffling the cards under the table. Well, thank you, she says with a confused smile. Shinji says so, too. Yes, Mr. Ikari, he says, toes curling. He has been good to you? She nods, her smile becoming more confident as she leans on her elbows. He really has, she says. Have you talked with him? I believe I threatened him. About what I would do if he hurt you. She frowns. Her brow knits and she digs her fingers into her palm as she stares at him and he looks away. It was during the blackout, he responds. He was questioning my relationship with you. Ayanami interrupted us before we could come to blows. I see, she says, and begins to stand. His hand presses on hers. His face turns passive, almost blank. Don't go, he says, please. Hear me out, Asuka. She sighs, sitting down and bowing her head, hands folded in front of her. Sighing, cracking his knuckles in his nervous habit that he picked up, he waits and for a second, considers checking the cards. He was right, he says. I have not meant to, but I have hurt you. But I do love you, Asuka. You are beautiful, and intelligent, and when I heard what had happened to you I was furious. Not just at Mother but at myself. Does that make sense? A little, she stammers, looking up, meeting his eyes, a little. Silence falls over the table, both smiling, honestly, for what may be the first time between them. He squeezes her hand, and she smiles back, the curling of her lips not forced at all. Hey there. Can anyone join or is this just a creepy inbreeding party? Monarch Hirishima stands at the table, hands on her hips and smirking as both turn to her and sputter, Asuka's face screwing in confusion. Azuri stares at her. I'm sorry? He asks, more out of confusion than outrage. The cards, Mana says. I saw you using them. Let me see them. She reaches over and snatches the deck of cards from his lap, reaching in his pocket as he protests and taking out the set of red file cards. The testing stage, she says, filing through the cards, many a career shattered by the need to cheat the test. Not bad, Yuri. Not bad. He's got technique, but he's also got something that counts as a third leg. She folds the yellow cards and slides them into her jeans pocket, holding up the stack of red. Tell me, Yuri, Mana says, when you went to Kaji for advice, did you tell him it was your sister you were trying to cheer up? No, Yuri protests, glancing between Asuka and Mana. I just assumed he knew I wanted to cheer up my sister and why are you talking to us? She hands him the first red card. He glances at it and his eyes go wide. That's disgusting. She's my sister. Kaworu waits, hearing nothing. Tentatively, he walks into the container yard, golden red eyes glancing from side to side as he breathes slowly, watching and waiting for movement. They are professionals. They should have found him, then he can get back to this business of using his great and mighty charm to woo her. Right? Hello? He asks, Miss Ayanami? Are you all right? A bit of movement. He glances as a grey cat walks by his feet and relaxes. Then he turns and stares into the unconscious face of one of his guards, hanging by his shoestrings from the beam above. He. The voice echoes like the wind, and he sees a flash of red before turning to the exit. Just as a container drops and blocks it off. I can see you. He backs away, breathing sharp and quick, backing into a container and feeling something on his shoulder. He looks up. Just water. Just water, ILO water. 3 of his guards are tied to the beam, their backs against it, and one wetted himself. Breaking into a run, he runs deeper into the yard, finding 2 guards tied side to side and flat against a metal crate, their hands in each other's pants despite being unconscious. Running past them, eyes glancing to every angle, looking for every sign and every motion, he skids to a stop in front of a sleeping polar bear and a ring of 6 unconscious guards resting against it. Good God, he whispers, Miss Ayanami, can you hear me? What you doing? I just wanted to talk, he says. Where are you? Silence. He grabs a guard's gun, holding it at ready, backing from the bear and staring at it, his heart beating out of his chest, pumping through his ears. I just wanted to talk, he says. I just wanted to talk. I just wanted to talk. More silence. The grey cat walks by him, stares at him, and runs away with a hiss. Where are you? He shouts. Where are you? He turns. His eyes lock with the A's of the hanging upside-down Ayanami, who grins and shows teeth. Right here. Grabbing him by the shirt, she lifts him into the rafters. Yuya and Gendo Ikari nod as the ringtone finally ceases and the click on the other side of the line tells them the phone is finally answered. Leaning on his desk in the commander's office, Yuya clears her throat. Ray? She asks, Section 2 said you were abducted. Are you all right? They both step back at the sound of the sharp, high-pitched scream on the other end of the line. Turning to each other, they quickly realize the owner of the scream is male. Are the kidnappers all right? Gendo asks. Let me down, the voice on the other end screams, let me down. Please, let me down. Say it, Ray shouts, say it. You're the ultimate life form. You're the ultimate life form. The phone clicks off. Yuya slides off the desk and wrings her hands, staring at Gendo. He stares back, taps his fingers on the desk, and sighs. I'll have Section 2 ready. The quicklime. The phone beeps, twice. Commander? Chairman Kill is on line 1. He says it's urgent. He watches as the door to the apartment closes and walks back to the elevator. She was happy, today, for the first time in a while. As much as he understands psychology, he knows some of it is but a mask, while there is still pain, too much pain underneath. The doors open and he looks up to stare into the eyes of Mari Makinami, who smiles in response to his. So, she says, big date with your sister? Mistaken circumstances, Yuri says with a sigh, and she is my adopted sister, as well. It would still be wrong, though, as I see her as my sister, if that helps. She grabs his arm, pulling him out of the elevator with a grin on her face. Nah, it's all right, she says. Say, I know you live in the G-front, right? Well, yes. Great. Walk with me there, she says with a wicked grin and a glint in her eye, and I can tell you where those pick-up lines Inspector Kaji gave you could use some work. He grins, nodding. His hand squeezes her own, his fingers interlacing with hers. A small look is passed between them and he laughs. Then he takes a closer look and raises an eyebrow. Why are you wearing the last angel on your head? Almost as if in response, The alarms blare and the catapult near the docks comes to life, launching a metal crate into the Pacific Ocean. Misato took things into her own hands, packed up the adult novelties into the largest crate she could find and had them launch it via EVA catapult into the Pacific. Maya looked heartbroken but carried on, and Ritsuko stares at her computer and sighs. "It's like I'm wearing nothing at all." A grimace, image of her assistant's nicely toned posterior in blue spandex passing her vision. "Nothing at all." Shaking a bit as she walks. "Nothing at all." She sighs. Rubbing the bridge of her nose and slumping back into her chair, she rests her folded hands on her lap and shrugs. "Stupid sexy Maya," she says, "well, alright. I guess I'm a lesbian." A bump against a wall and Ritsuko turns, just as Maya quickly gathers up her folders and runs back into the hallway. Akagi could swear she heard the girl squeal.